One Question is designed to give subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to One Question, where we highlight executive leaders in college athletics. Our guest today is Coach Danielle O'Banion. Danielle is the assistant women's basketball coach at the University of Minnesota. Greetings, Danielle. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Coach, you've been in the coaching profession for roughly 18 years, 17 of those years as a NCAA Division I women's basketball coach with 1 year in high school. And, of course, the career of a coach has its highs and its lows. And one of the highs for you was being named the head women's basketball coach at Kent State, a position which you held for, I think, 4 seasons. And now that you've moved past that role, can you tell us what some of the lessons in leadership that you reflect on from that time, and how are you using those lessons in your current position there at University of Minnesota?
There are many lessons I learned during my time at Kent State. I'll always be grateful for those 4 years. I think the one that I was told and I learned on my own was not to delegate relationships. And Joanne P. McCauley, who's currently the head women's coach at Duke, said this years and years ago when she spoke at a symposium that I attended. And what she meant by that was not missing an opportunity to connect with people in and around your program on a consistent basis. And when I became the head coach at Kent State, Ty, there was so much that we were undertaking that I inadvertently did delegate some relationships. And probably the most costly relationships that I delegated were with our support staff, with our strength and conditioning coach, with our athletic trainer to a certain degree, and with our academic advisor. And I got better at managing those relationships and nurturing those relationships into years 3 and 4. But in the first 2 years, because I felt like I was drinking from a fire hose, I didn't manage those relationships as well. And I think one of the biggest lessons I learned through experience, despite having been told that information, was not to delegate relationships in general, but especially not with the support staff.
I wonder, for anybody who becomes a first-time head coach, first-time athletics director, they're probably going to be trying to catch a moving train or drinking through a fire hose, like you said. How does someone do all the things that are necessary as they're learning to become a head coach, but also keep the relationships close?
Looking back on it, honestly, I think that I didn't realize as a first-time head coach how much mentoring and growing that I would need to do with my staff in addition to our student athletes. Mm-hmm. In my mind, I was fully committed to growing our young women on the roster and also recruiting. I mean, we inherited 6 players on the roster when we got hired at Kent State, and so the majority of our efforts were spent fortifying the roster from a recruiting standpoint. So I prioritized those relationships and fully expected to manage player personnel issues. I did not, however, expect to manage my staff in that way. And I think looking back on it now, it would be a matter of prioritizing the relationships with any person in close proximity to our program. So again, pointing toward the high volume support staff areas, the strength and conditioning area, athletic training, academic advisor. Those folks have more access and ear with our players than we do as coaches. And looking back on it, I should have spent more time myself with those 3 positions in particular, in addition to the coaching staff and our players.
Well, you know, we learn from the experiences we've been through. Now you find yourself there at University of Minnesota as an assistant coach. You, I believe, second stint there at Minnesota. Talk about how the things you just mentioned, how are you applying that as an assistant coach, right, supporting the head coach and the program that you support now?
Sure. One of the things I'm trying to bring to Lindsay Whalen, our head coach here, is just trying to communicate just that. You know, we have liaisons to various areas within our program and around our program, but I'm constantly wanting to make sure that those folks, our academic support people, our athletic trainer, our strength and performance coach, I'm constantly trying to make sure that they're hearing from her directly as well, because where there is silence, that void gets filled with negativity, as we've all read and heard before. And so I'm just trying to help her connect with those folks, even though there are some things that as an assistant coach that we should be managing on her behalf. She still has to have that FaceTime from time to time with those folks.
I assume that's working. I mean, you are emphasizing something you feel is important for the head coach, right? Hey, we'll handle the weeds, but there is an importance in FaceTime when you're dealing with the people you mentioned. How has she received that direction from you?
She's been fantastic, and I'm constantly amazed by everything that she's managing. Not only did she transition from being a professional basketball player to a CEO, but she's doing it on a national stage at the highest level. And one thing that has always made Lindsay endearing to folks around her is that she's a tremendous teammate, because she is very committed to communicating and connecting with folks. And so it's a natural gift and skill, I think, that she continues to work on, especially having played at the point guard position for so many years. But she's doing great. And the nice thing for her is that she has that genuine demeanor and approach and rapport with people, and so she's getting people to come to her directly that in other situations might not, because they're intimidated, if that makes sense. But she has that rapport with folks. People feel like they've known her for years because she has been on a very public stage. So she's doing a very nice job of managing those relationships.
Right, and it's probably great for her to have an assistant on staff that has been a head coach and that can also make recommendations that could possibly help out the program. Now, when you were the head coach there at Kent State, you fought an illness, right, that many of us have seen either personally or we've been close to someone as a friend or a family who's went through some variety of the illness. What lessons in leadership did you learn about yourself and others around you during that period of your life and career?
Well, I was diagnosed with lymphoma, which is blood cancer, in November of 2014. And certainly that was not part of my annual plan when it was time to write out the inner workings of running a basketball program.
Right.
But I was very fortunate to have great family support, tremendous medical team, and was able to coach through that time while I was in treatment. And now I'm cancer-free, thank God. But I think one of the biggest lessons I learned during that time was the value of routine. And my physicians were, and oncologists and nurses, they were all very supportive of me continuing to fulfill my responsibility to our basketball program. My family certainly supported that. Our coaching staff was unbelievably supportive during that period. But the best thing that happened during that time, Tai, was that I was able to maintain some semblance of routine and normalcy. And so what I mean by that was, thankfully, by the grace of God, I was able to continue to work out during that period. I was able to practice plan, watch film, even go on recruiting trips, and coach basketball games, and really try to pour into our student athletes instead of focusing on, quote unquote, being sick.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've told people many times that the best medicine during that time was the basketball and the routine of getting ready for the next practice, next game, next recruiting trip, and just focusing on that and not letting our team and our program down. So there's sometimes, I think I've mentioned this before, there's sometimes I wonder if taking a sabbatical while I was in treatment would have benefited the growth of the program. But in hindsight, and still to this day, I think one of the leadership lessons during that time that I learned was that I can't take a time out unless I have to. And
Right.
so it was really important to me to uphold my responsibility to my family and to our team. And I'm hopeful that our student athletes that played for us at Kent State during that time, I'm prayerful that they would look back on that time and realize that when they're facing various challenges, that it can be done because we did it together during that time.
Right. Well, when I look at pictures going through that time, of course, when I met you years ago, you had a head full of locks, and when I look at pictures, right, there was no hair, right? You were going through treatment, and that seemed to
Right.
take for a woman, that seems to take a lot of courage, right, to come out, go through treatment without any hair, especially somebody coming from locks, which take a while to grow. That had to be kind of like a guiding light of courage for the women who were on the team at the time you were playing, and some of your assistant coach, and probably people around the industry and throughout college athletics. Did you receive feedback from people? And you also mentioned you hope you were a guiding light for your student athletes. Do you hear from them now, or talk to me a little bit about that part?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I don't know if I've shared this before, but I made a deal. I made a deal with God, and I said to him, God, if you bring me through this, I'll never ever miss an opportunity to give you all the glory and the praise for bringing us through it. And so that's what's happened, and so I never miss out on an opportunity to do that. And so with that being said, I didn't feel like I had a choice to hide. I didn't feel like I had a choice to run away from the gift of this being part of my story. And so it was important to me that I didn't wear a wig. It was important to me that however, the world would see me in treatment, that it would be me without any cosmetic enhancements.
Right.
And so, I do fortunately get feedback from folks, and including some of our players, that was really encouraging for them, and that's and I'm grateful that it turned out that way, and it's important to me just the way that there were some people around me that poured into me and prayed over me that were also in treatment or recently diagnosed and recently diagnosed as cancer-free, that those people wrapped me up and poured words of encouragement and prayers. So I try to pay that forward as well, because that's how we all get through life, right? You've been through some things and you share with folks that are walking a similar journey, and so it's a circle of life, really. So yes, there have been times where I've gotten feedback from folks that were encouraged during that time frame, and like I said, I made a deal, and I'm holding up my end of the deal.
Right. Now, you mentioned one thing there that I thought was pretty important, and in my mind, this is how I processed it. Right, I'll take it on the level of how my brain processes it. When going through a challenge, a depression, a sickness, anything, sometimes one of the most helpful things can be routine. You mentioned routine in basketball and the things you were doing, but just a routine period, something to look forward to, can be pretty helpful. That seems like one of the big lessons you probably learned. Like, even if it's not as serious as an illness like you had, just even some challenges, routine can probably be the thing to help you get through those challenges.
There's no doubt, and that's been reinforced. Ty, now working with Lindsay, she was a career professional basketball player, and to hear the various routines that she had, whether it was getting ready for a road game and she went to lunch with the same 3 or 4 teammates every road game day, but her routine changed the night before home games, and so she and her husband would go to the same restaurant, have the same food the night before the game at home, and then game day was very much the same rhythm.
Right.
And so it's been interesting to listen to her emphasize that with our players, and to even talk about how she's finding new routines now as a coach as opposed to a player. There is great value, tremendous value in routine. From a preparation standpoint, at least I believe, and she's only helped me confirm that, because she's talked about the value of routines and helping her, even get ready as she got older in her career, prepping for preseason and training camp. So I do agree with you. I do think that routine it's really the only thing that you can control when things, sometimes feel like you've kind of lost grasp on them.
I'll wrap with this last question about leadership and some of the lessons you learned during your career and life. Should you get another opportunity to be a head coach, what aspects of those previous experiences, as when you were at Kent State, going through the challenges of the illness, even what you're learning now there as an assistant coach, what aspects of your previous experience and current philosophy will you apply that will hopefully lead to success if you do get a chance to lead another program?
I'll start by saying I'm not necessarily sure that I want to be a head coach again, largely because my perspective has been enhanced by that time in treatment. And when I say that, I'm not working any less hard. I'm not, any less committed. I just don't feel the need to feel validated by that title anymore. Right. Whereas when I was younger in my career, I was in the rat race and chasing validation through the profession, and probably made some mistakes as a result, to be honest. And so now I'm just really excited to affirm and validate the folks around. And so, when I answered your first question about maybe a misstep or a lesson learned at Kent State, I think we all would say to be successful in life, you need to value relationships. And I've always valued relationships. I just did not nurture relationships at Kent State that I needed to as consistently as I needed to. And so now, as an assistant coach, I'm just really committed to that every opportunity. I'm admittedly not necessarily a feeler, and so, I can acknowledge that from an emotional standpoint. I'm trying to make sure that I'm spending more time with the feelers in and around our program, and so just making a more intentional effort to connect with folks that maybe experience the world different from me. I'm just trying to be more intentional with that. And honestly, just trying to be more present. And that was one of the other gifts I got from being in treatment, just learning to enjoy every moment, because you're not sure what the next moment will bring or if there will be a next moment. And so those are probably two leadership lessons that I'm just trying to keep in the forefront of the brain in every interaction, waking up every day. And then, whatever happens from here on out, honestly, I see it as bonus time.
Right.
We're in bonus time right now, as far as I'm concerned, and so whatever God has for me, He has for me, and I'll be accepting it and grateful for it.
Well, Coach, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on One Question.
Thanks for the opportunity, Ty.
That was Coach Danielle O'Banion. She's an assistant women's basketball coach at University of Minnesota, and of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of One Question is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.